What's up, guys? Welcome to the Papi Chulo channel. My name is Chris, aka Papi Chulo, aka many other less funny names. What we're working on right now is the 2005 Nike SB Dunk Low Stussy Cherry. If you don't know, this shoe, when dead stock, aka brand new, is on StockX right now for the low price of $3,980. What you're seeing now was supposed to be towards the end of this video, but there was something I really hadn't noticed until the end that was pretty off about this project. I used Angelus pink suede dye right out of the bottle, just like I have in the past for Strangelove SB Dunks. Now, for the Strangelove, the color is 1-to-1 spot on. And I just thought in my head, well, that's a light enough pink. Should be fine. Wrong. I'm doing this big tape unveiling for you here of the brown color, which, by the way, I nailed. So proud of myself for that. But even now, when you're watching me remove the tape on this shoe, I didn't realize how dark the pink was. It wasn't until this unveiling here that I realized how dark the pink is. Now, here is what the pink is supposed to look like, and here's mine. Even if I tried camera tricks to lighten it, you could still tell that the pink was too dark. And here's the before and after of this specific shoe, and it's pretty good. So we are going to back up to not the beginning of the project, because frankly this was just a standard sole swap and repaint, but go back to the first time using my $300 hand crank cobbler sewing machine and the challenges that posed to how I fixed the pink and created a nubuck effect. So here's the first time I'm using my cobbler sewing machine. One thing you have to be careful of, this is a huge needle. Make sure when you're sliding that shoe in there that you are careful not to poke it with the needle or scratch it with the needle, because that would not be good. And this is my very first actual stitch with this new machine that I had just mounted on this table. Now we're getting stuck there, and that's actually a bad sign. That means that the bobbin, which is the back stitch underneath, is either not spinning well or the thread is getting caught somehow. But I just carried on as much as I could, because I kind of knew that the first stitch wasn't going to go well, but I needed to know how it wasn't going to go well so that I could fix it. You can see in the back there was just a little autofocus. That's that little hand crank. Now I am just carefully going to each factory hole of this brand new outsole. I'm taking my time to make sure that I get it right in that factory hole. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You see, when these shoes are actually manufactured by real professionals with real professional equipment, that they do this within 10 seconds at the most, it seems. I mean, that shoe is just spinning. I don't feel comfortable doing it that fast. I don't need to do it that fast either, because I'm restoring a shoe. I'm not manufacturing hundreds of them, so I think that's fine. I do want to point out that you see those two screw heads up at the top by the needle there. That is where the presser foot goes, and I removed the presser foot I found that the presser foot was getting in my view of these factory holes, and it wasn't really helping pulling the shoe for the next hole anyway. So I decided to remove that. You don't have to, but for me, I think it was a lot easier. Now for other applications, you probably want the presser foot, like if you were sewing a Air Jordan 4 wing back on, or Air Jordan 3 back tab or something like that. You would like to have that mechanical pull that like gives you like this constant mathematical jump to the next spot. But in this instance, the factory holes are already there for me, and I just needed to see where they were, so I took it off. But it was easy to take off, and it's easy to put back on. You could see some loose stitches there by the toe area. That's a bad sign as well. I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know what it was just yet. Okay, so finally cutting it off, and I wanted to give you guys a view of the inside of the shoe to see the stitching job there, and it is awful. It is god awful. That is a terrible stitching job. Look how loose the back stitch is. I could just kind of pull it out. I think I did pull it out. So something is up. I shouldn't be able to do that after I stitch. I'm just basically taking it apart again. The whole thing. So I first troubleshoot into the bobbin area. The bobbin, which is the back stitch, needs to have a certain tension, and frankly that tension is a mystery. There is only one way to tighten it down, and it is this little tiny screw head right there that the thread is going through. You can tighten that to the right, loosen it to the left. This is where I discover that my screwdriver is actually too big for that stupid little screw. Another thing you need to troubleshoot is how far your needle is going down. You can adjust it up or down to some extent. Every needle length is not exactly the same, but what needs to happen is the eye of the needle, once it takes that plunge, it kind of sits there for a little bit during a full cycle. The eye needs to be at the base of that spinny thing that's spinning around the bobbin holder. So that's what I'm doing. There's just a little set screw on the top that you can loosen, and I can bring it down so that needle is right just above the base of this, I don't know what it's called, a carriage spinner, whatever. And of course, this is where I finally discover that the needle that I'm using is just too short for this machine, because the way I have to set it, I actually end up pulling it right out of where it needs to be held. So, need to get another needle, longer one. So this is the next day. I stopped over at Tandy Leather, got a longer needle, and as you can see, during the plunge, the eye of the needle is right at the base of the spinny thing. Now I'm just gonna reload my bobbin that I have tightened up a little bit. You're gonna wanna bring your thread over to that little groove there that it sticks out of, and then put the cover back on. And then once the needle is threaded, you're gonna do one cycle with the hand crank to pick up your bobbin. Should come out fairly easily. And once that happens, you're ready to start stitching. Now during take 2, this felt like a dream. It felt very easy to stitch, which was great. I was feeling pretty good. I got my new needle. I fixed the bobbin a little bit, and I was ready to get this done. However, this is bad. This is real bad. There's no tension on the front stitch, just these big loops inside. So it's not pulling on that back stitch. And once again, I can take apart the whole dang shoe just with my hands pulling out the strings, which obviously shouldn't happen. So up here on one of the wheels where you thread the needle, there is a nut there that you can tighten the tension with. So that is the first place that I would go when I need more tension on the front stitch. Something still wasn't feeling right, and as you can see, those loops are still there, they're just smaller. So I still need more tension in order to get this stitch right. Now there is a second tension wheel that if you watch videos on these China leather patchers tell you, basically you don't have to use. Because to create too much tension going through 2 tension wheels, well, I went through the first one, I have it cranked all the way down, and I still don't have enough tension. So I decided to go through the second one. Now, what is this, trial 4, trial 5? I've already lost count. I'm taking deep breaths, trying not to get too frustrated. This is not my shoe. This is a very expensive shoe, and we need to get the stitch right. And you can tell by my sigh there, as I peeked into the shoe,
Yeah.
that we're looking good. We're looking like a real quality stitch finally. So now we're just taking it from the beginning of this video where I realized that the pink was too dark. And this is trial number 2 in painting this pink. Taping off all of the brown, taping off all of the midsole, taping off the bottom as well. There's a couple things that I can suggest you get over at Harbor Freight if you're here in the States. I'm not sure if they are an international store or not, but they are a hardware store with very cheap hardware. And some of it is bad, but some of it is good. I'm using part of a pick set. And the pick set is basically these little hooks or these little, I guess what you would imagine a dentist would use on your teeth. It's a set of things like that. And they are great for trying to get dirt out of outsoles that you couldn't get with scrubbing or water. They are also great for taping when you can wrap the tape around the edge of the leather that you do not want any paint on. It gives you a nice tight fit. I decided to prime it first since the pink was darker on the underneath. So I went with Angelus flat white acrylic leather paint. Also too thin because I am using an airbrush. And I put duller in there. I guess I didn't film it, but I almost always put at least a tiny drop of duller in all of the paint mixes that I do.
Yep. Alright, be my cameraman.
Do you know how to zoom in?
No.
Twist the lens right here. Just turn it this way.
How do you make this go up a little?
Do you want to tilt it up or do you want to bring it up like this? Tilt is like that, but bringing it up is this.
Okay, it's going a little bit.
You can touch. You can touch too when you want it to focus on something. How are we looking? Good?
Yep.
And here's the paint mix I made with my daughter. This is mostly white. We just kept adding a drop or two of red until we decided that it was the right color pink. The pink is much better now. It's like a very light rosy pink, much more in line with what the Stussy Cherry is supposed to look like. Even though I'm using a heat gun to dry the paint, I don't have it on a heat gun type setting. I don't want to burn the paint, I don't want to burn the leather. It's actually, I would call like a blow dryer setting. It's still pretty warm, but it's not like crazy hot. So I was reading up on some art blogs about a technique where you can add texture to acrylic paint by adding baking powder. The Stussy Cherry Dunks have essentially, it's like a nubuck, but it's a fake nubuck. It's actually just, I think, this powdery substance that is epoxied onto what looks like a denim. But it definitely has this flat kind of sandy-ish texture. And I wanted to try to recreate that. So it wasn't enough for me to fix it to just make it look right. I decided I wanted to try to make it feel right too. But this is a total experiment here where I am just trying to do the ratios that I have read online to add baking powder to this mix to see how it goes. I started testing it out on a piece of scrap leather that has basically that polyurethane coating that is typical on sneakers. Just to see, I put that primer on and then I put some of this on, and I'm gonna dry set it and see what it looks like and what it feels like. So I added some too thin because my idea was to use the airbrush, which is comical in retrospect, but frustrating at the time. And frankly, I thought it looked and felt pretty good. Now, I had to add a lot of too thin, but eventually I was actually able to get this mix out of my airbrush, which is what I wanted to try to make it look nice and even. I have the air compressor set here to a pretty high PSI because the thicker the material you're trying to push, the higher the PSI should be. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm still kind of struggling to cover an area with this paint. Without that baking soda in there, I would have already been done that toe area, but I am still going back and forth and back and forth. What was most frustrating is that sometimes it worked and then it didn't, and then it worked and then it didn't. It was too inconsistent. And the truth is, I wasn't really getting the added effect or the added bonus of that texture as much as I wanted anyway, because I had to dilute it so much in order to get it out of the airbrush. When you use a paintbrush with this type of acrylic paint and baking powder or baking soda mix, it does not go on even. It goes on very, very random. People use it to upcycle flower vases that they find at thrift stores to sell them and make them look nice. But it's more for like a glass effect. It's not very conducive to a nice, even leather paint. So I went back to the drawing board. I had an idea, but first, before I committed to that idea, I needed to acetone and cotton ball this whole shoe again. What was that idea, you may ask? This is called flock. Flock has a variety of different crafts uses, essentially trying to make something fuzzy. It's what is used to make dashboards in cars fuzzy, and if you're doing a dashboard in a car, you're going to want that to be something very durable, and it really is if applied correctly. So if you are rubbing your finger hard up and down on this dashboard, if it's done correctly, none of that flock powder is going to come off. It's just going to feel fuzzy. There's other applications for this that are a little more common. Flocking the inside of the drawers on jewelry cabinets can be common because you don't want to put a precious metal onto a hard surface like wood. Making textures for miniature landscapes and miniatures, a nice little craft hobby. I mean, there is tons of applications that I can't really get into all of them, but you could really flock things up. I mean, if you want to flock, you can flock. And if you want to flock with your friends, well, flock your friends, you know? But you could flock yourself. You know, you could flock yourself, you could flock your friends. You can really flock things up. I mean, if there's someone that you don't want to flock with, you just tell them to go flock themselves, okay? Because they can flock by themselves and you can flock yourself, and that's fine. Me, I flock shoes. That's my thing. I'll flock shoes all day long. I'll flock some shoes in the morning and I'll flock some shoes in the afternoon. Nobody's going to stop me from flocking. Leather suede glue is something that you should probably have on hand, as well as a nice brush to apply it with. And condiment bottles. I actually use condiment bottles for a lot of things in the workshop, but this is great to apply the flock. You put the flock in there and then you push it out with air and it comes out in a nice stream. Always wear your condiments. Now, aside from the leather glue, the other way that the flock attaches to the shoe is with acrylic paint. And that's actually what they usually provide you when they ship you flock. They ship you just some acrylic paint. Now, this order did not come with any acrylic paint, but that is fine because I wouldn't probably use it anyway because it's not Angelus, it's not leather, it doesn't have as much of a thick pigment ratio as what I would make with Angelus. So what I'm doing next is I'm just trying to find a paint match for the flock, because you will be flocking and then you will be painting over that flock, and then you will flock on top of that paint, and then you will paint over that flock, and then you keep flocking. You keep flocking, you don't ever stop flocking. And make sure you get some duller in your mix. Like I said, I use duller for all of my paint mixes for shoes. So just take some of that leather glue, you don't need a whole lot, and your brush, and brush it on nice and evenly. One thing to be careful of is those holes on the toe box. You don't want to get any glue covering those holes on the toe box. You are going to be flocking over those holes, but you don't want to flock the holes. You don't want to flock just any old random hole, okay? You want to make sure that you are flocking what you're supposed to be flocking, and not just flocking any hole that you see that you think needs to get flocked. And here it is. Got that condiment squeeze bottle. I have it full of some of that flock, and I am just squeezing it over the glue. And flock is going to stick to that glue. Now you will put down way more than you need. And the other thing too is you could be resourceful and save the flock. You could put something hard and flat under it. That way the flock that falls off after after the initial leather glue is dry, you could reuse. And I did that in the past, but with this pink, I just was already way past a deadline that I set for myself. So I just didn't want to take that extra step and save the flock. But honestly, if I had, then maybe I wouldn't have ran out of the whole entire bag of flock. I used the whole bag. And with that pick, make sure you get it in all those holes. Get it in every single hole that you see. Squeeze that bottle all over. Make sure you are using maybe at least twice as much flock as you think you need. That way, every single cubic atom that has glue gets some of that flock. Now this leather glue that I was using doesn't provide a cure time on the bottle, so I just let it sit overnight. This is my little dust collecting system I have set up. I used an older IKEA desk and I cut a rectangle into it and used that rectangle to seal off that drawer space. And I put a dust collector hose on the inside of that, and I hook that dust collector to a shop vac. So I run the shop vac, and any dust that goes into that area there goes into that hole. And I'm also putting a towel on top of my little plastic container there, and I am spraying it with water. That way any dust gets near it, it'll just stick to it instead of going in the air. Now by dust I mean flock, and they are going to be tiny particles, so you need to wear your PPE to watch the rest of this video. Now of course I have mine, and there is me, and I am applying it, and I'm making sure it's really nice and tight around my face, around my huge nose. I have a hook nose, so you really have to make sure that you have good suction there. And then you do a stupid little dance because you think you're cool. So the first thing I'm actually doing with my airbrush is I am just literally blowing air all over the shoes to get off all of the excess flock before I start my first coat of actual paint. And I got this, it's like a PC dust blower. I don't like to use it too often in this space though, because it pushes air so hard that that space that I have to collect dust, it actually ends up kicking dust out of it. So I don't like to use it too much that close. But since these are such small particles and this is such an important job, I just wanted to make sure that the shoes were as clean as possible before I started. Now it's pretty simple. Apply paint, then apply flock. Then apply paint, then apply flock. Over and over again on each section of the shoe that you want to get flocked. I actually wasn't trying to do the gag there, but it just came out. Now, when you switch shoes, just be gentle with the one that has flock on it. Make sure you don't shake it too much and get flock off of it that got off because the paint was still wet. Now, I realize I am wasting a lot of flock doing it this way, but I think I'm also saving my lungs and saving dust getting all over the workshop. I have other shoes there. I don't want to get dusty. I have my computer, equipment, all kinds of stuff that I would rather just not get covered in particles of flock. So it is my choice to just waste it, but you don't have to do that. You can save the flock that falls off and just keep putting it back on until it sticks. I am heat setting the acrylic paint just like I would normally with a lower heat, blow dryer heat, but not crazy hot heat gun heat. Of course, that's blowing off some of the excess flock, but this is fine. This job has a deadline, so I don't really want to wait around until everything cures all of the time. I have plenty of flock to use, so I'm just gonna flock this thing. Jesus. Little warning next time. Now I'm gonna start sanding. When I initially started sanding, I started all the way up with 1500, and then I did 1200, and then eventually went all the way down to 320. But I went from lighter to harsher because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't ripping off any of that new flock. Oh my God. Glasses don't make it any better. So with that pick set I was telling you about that I got at Harbor Freight, I am now clearing out those holes once again. And also I'm going to be using this to separate the tape from the flock at any of those edges. That way when I pull the tape off, I'm not pulling any flock off. So here's the reveal with the tape off. I sure hope that was as satisfying for you as it was for me. Now, my issue with the shoe, my primary issue with the shoe once it was unveiled, was the tape lines. The separation between the tape and the flock were very visible. This is the first time that I do full panels with flock. Before, I would just do a small hole with flock, and it would cover the hole up. So what I'm doing now is I am sanding in those edges to try to blend them in to the rest of the panel. There was some spacing there that sanding just wouldn't cover, so I decided to try to paint those areas to blend them in a little bit better to make them look not so stark. But I am still developing this method. Obviously, it's not perfect, but if anyone has any suggestions as to how to tape it differently or do something differently so that the spacing doesn't rear its ugly head in the final process, because the spacing, what is it, like a millimeter or whatever, but it is still visible. And so I am finally done. So here are some photographs of the before and after. As you can see, the shoe was super beat when I got it. The outsoles were cooked. So the Stussy Cherry, when it came out, had this like synthetic nubuck material as part of the pink of the shoe. It wasn't real nubuck. Now I discovered that by deconstructing the shoe using acetone, because I could remove that fake nubuck with my fingernail anyway. It's just dried out and old. The shoe is, I guess, 18 years old now. I tried to reverse engineer what I saw, and what I saw was this powdery substance, I guess, that was glued down onto what appeared like a very light denim. When you look at the shoe, you think that it's leather there. It's not. You think that it might be nubuck there. It's not. It's synthetic, powdery something. It has a soft, textury kind of feel, but still almost kind of like chalk. So I thought that the flock would be the best option for this project. It turns out that the flock itself is probably a little long, and I need to come up with a better way to sand it down. I need to sand it down flatter so it looks a little bit shorter. Some people said that it looked like I sueded the shoe out, and that's not really what my intention was. But I mean, they see what they see, and I see it too, and I think that looks cool, but that's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to restore or reverse engineer. So if there's any of you out there that have some ideas on how I can develop this flocking method a little better for short nubuck type materials, I am all ears. I've been using this method to repair skated shoes with suede, like a Heineken with a hole. I did that as my first flocking experiment, and I thought it went really well. My only issue with that one is that I didn't have a sewing machine at the time to recreate the stitches on the edges. Anyway, that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe. Check out my Instagram at Papi Shulo. Check out my TikTok, Papi Shulo. If you watched the video, you saw all of the tags in the corners. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.